Now, Yaron Vandersloot told us on the record they sold Natalee Holloway for $10,000. Now, Vandersloot says he was lying to us and made up the story. Lie or no lie, it is a fact that human trafficking is an international crisis. Bigger numbers of people sold for labor, for sex, and just plain cruel. Moments ago, we spoke to Ambassador Mark Lagon, Secretary of State Rice's global advisor for fighting human trafficking. Ambassador, thank you very much for agreeing to sit down and talk to us.
Great being with you.
Ambassador, I'm not going to ask you anything about Natalee Holloway case. It's an ongoing investigation that we're working on, and while we've been seeking to prove or disprove what happened to her, one of the things that's come to our attention is the enormity of the problem of human trafficking. And this is your job.
It is. I head the Office of the State Department to fight this problem of sex trafficking and forced labor, working with other countries.
I was reading some of your materials, and it's astounding. Across borders, over 800,000 people a year or more.
Yeah. If you look at trafficking within borders, it's millions, and across borders we think it's at least 800,000 people a year, many of them for sexual exploitation. We think a good 80% of them females who are the victims.
Is this a problem, let's say in the last 5 years, it's growing or it's decreasing, or can't you figure that out?
I think it's growing, but we certainly are more aware of this problem. Nations around the world are beginning to put in place laws and only starting to effectively prosecute the bad guys and implement those laws.
Ambassador, you said it's worldwide?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, our attention has been focused more in the South America, Caribbean area. We've got a map here. You've given me this map. Tell me, in the sort of Aruba, Venezuela, Caribbean area, what has our State Department determined?
Well, in the Caribbean, you see a lot of transit of human trafficking victims, a lot of them for sexual exploitation. In the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, there's been increased focus on children in prostitution, but not enough of people who are adults. And there's a problem in the region, including where there's legal prostitution, for there being a magnet for sex trafficking. Venezuela had for 3 years in a row the lowest ranking in our annual global report on its record in fighting human trafficking until last year, and it moved up to the second lowest category of Tier 2 watch list.
Is there any record or history of actual trafficking through Aruba?
There is. Aruba, being small, is not ranked in the tier system of our report, but there are cases. Admittedly, much of the pattern seems to be going to Aruba, but it is quite conceivable that trafficking from Aruba is possible. In
Aruba, do you find that have the police been sort of willing to look at the problem? Are they honest, thorough, good, or does our State Department have any problem with the law enforcement in Aruba?
I'm not in a position to give you a really good assessment of that, but it is a region in which, in Latin America, corruption and lack of efficacy of law enforcement is serious.
We've been dealing with the Natalee Holloway case, which is not part of this investigation, but one of the things that we have is that we have some information that we'd like them to look at. But there's an unwillingness to even look at what we have. Maybe what we have is true, maybe it's a wild goose chase, but what we can't get to look at to see as a possibility. Do you find that unusual?
Everyone should be open to the opportunity to look at evidence because the possibility of trafficking in this region is serious.
What do these women say? I don't know if you've ever spoken to them or talked to people who have been the victim of trafficking. You know, everyone says, well, why don't you just walk away? If you're out on the street being a prostitute or whatever, why don't you just walk away? And I mean, I've talked to them, and I know not to the people who've been trafficked, but the extreme coercion. But what do you hear?
The definition of human trafficking by law and under UN treaties is it involves force, fraud, and coercion. In general prostitution, there is a lot of violence and manipulation by pimps. And in the situation of human trafficking, terribly acute. Oftentimes, people are kept in a brothel. They can't leave. They're living and being exploited in the same place. Their traffickers get them into debt. They make them afraid that if they run, they're only going to be treated like a criminal.
I take it then that you are not dismissive of the possibility that this could have happened to Natalee Holloway. You can't say that it did, but you're not dismissive.
I'm not. The flow of human trafficking through this region is significant. The rule of law is lacking. Where there is even laws, like in Aruba, they're not well implemented. It's quite possible that this is happening on a significant scale. So you really can't reject out of hand that idea.
Ambassador, thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for coming into the office.
Our entire interview with the ambassador will be posted on Greta Wire tomorrow. And up next, the results of your live vote. Do you think former President Clinton would be